Imagine a world where overnight German products suddenly cost twice as much in the United States, where Chinese companies wake up to find their American business has just disappeared. A world where entire countries have to choose between two superpowers, Russia or the United States, and they have only 50 days to make that decision. Donald Trump just dropped what might be the boldest ultimatum in modern history, aimed at Vladimir Putin. And the answer the Russian gives in the next 7 weeks could completely reshape the world order as we know it. Get ready, because you're about to see how a single political move can spark a conflict on a scale never seen before. On July 14th, Trump announced that the United States will impose secondary tariffs on countries doing business with Russia if a ceasefire agreement isn't reached within 50 days. But before we go on, let me quickly explain what you just heard. Trump invoked a law called the International Emergency Economic Powers Act to slap tariffs on imports, something unprecedented in American history. He already put in place a universal 10% tariff on all countries back in April 2025, on a day he himself called Liberation Day. Now, what we have here goes way beyond a simple trade threat. We're talking about a total overhaul of how the West sees military support to Ukraine, combined with the most powerful economic weapon the United States has used since World War II. Until 2024, the model worked like this. The United States sent billions in military gear directly to Ukraine, covering all the costs. It was like the rich uncle in the family, always picking up the restaurant tab. But Trump completely flipped that dynamic. Now, NATO countries have to buy American weapons with their own money and then pass that equipment on to Ukraine. It's like the same rich uncle now saying, "Look, I got the best plates, but you guys got to pay for them if you want to help out the needy cousin." This change is absolutely genius from an American economic perspective. The United States remains the main supplier of advanced military tech, but now they're effectively turning an expense into revenue. Patriot missile defense systems costing about $1 billion per battery, Javelin anti-tank missiles at $175,000 each, and THAAD missile defense systems that can hit $3 billion per system. All of these now go through the American cash register before hitting the battlefield. According to sources close to NATO discussions, this strategy isn't just about money. It's about creating what strategists call shared responsibility. When a country pays directly for military equipment, it tends to watch much more closely how that gear is used and how effective it is. But this new military funding framework is just the start of strategy. Trump said exactly that, a 50-day deadline to reach a ceasefire agreement with the threat of slapping 100% tariffs on countries that keep doing business with Russia. To put this into perspective, a 100% tariff means any product from those countries would cost American consumers exactly twice the normal price. Now, you might be wondering, but why exactly 50 days? The answer lies in negotiation psychology. 50 days is enough time for world leaders to get organized and make serious decisions, but short enough to create real, constant pressure. It's like giving students a test. If you give too much time, they procrastinate. Too little time, and they panic and freeze up. But here's the most fascinating detail. Trump has already shown he's not bluffing. He already invoked the International Emergency Economic Powers Act to implement universal 10% tariffs on all countries in April 2025. That was like a warning shot to show the world he has both the legal authority and the political will to do exactly what he's threatening. The mechanism works like this. If Russia doesn't accept a ceasefire, countries like Germany, which imports Russian products, will see their exports to the U.S. instantly become 100% more expensive for American consumers. It's like overnight, a Mercedes would cost the same as 2 Mercedes. This strategy is particularly brutal because it forces countries to choose between 2 vital trade relationships. The European Union finds itself in a particularly tricky spot. Even with all the sanctions already in place, according to defense experts, at the start of 2025, the United States provided 20% of all the military equipment Ukraine was using, with 25% provided by Europe and 55% produced by Ukraine itself. This shows how deeply involved Europe already is in the military support effort. NATO allies agreed on a baseline funding of 40 billion euros for military aid to Ukraine next year, having already provided over 50 billion euros in 2024, with almost 60% coming from European allies and Canada. In 2025, allies have already committed to add another 35 billion euros in security assistance. For countries like Germany and France, with strong industrial economies heavily reliant on international trade, a 100% tariff is a real economic nightmare. German companies exporting cars, machinery, and chemicals to the US would see their products become completely uncompetitive overnight. In Asia, the situation is even more complicated. China, which keeps substantial trade ties with both Russia and the United States, finds itself in an extremely uncomfortable position. Beijing has avoided direct criticism of the American strategy, but is internally speeding up deals with alternative suppliers from the Middle East. But when an economic strategy of this magnitude is announced, the first thing everyone wants to know is, what's the target thinking? In Moscow's case, the answer is fascinating because it reveals an interesting contradiction between public rhetoric and market reactions. Publicly, the Kremlin sticks to its usual defiant stance. Spokesperson Dmitry Peskov called the ultimatum just another American media stunt and reaffirmed that Russia does not bow to deadlines imposed by external powers. That's the expected response. No government admits publicly to being successfully pressured. But financial markets tell a totally different story. The main Russian stock index jumped significantly as soon as Trump announced the additional sanctions in 50 days. This is revealing because it shows that despite the official rhetoric, Russian investors are clearly worried about the economic fallout from even greater isolation. Diplomatic sources close to the Russian government report that internally there are heated debates about how to respond to this new pressure. Options on the table range from direct trade retaliation to possible escalations on other geopolitical fronts, like increasing naval presence in the Black Sea or ramping up disinformation operations. What makes this situation especially tricky for Moscow is that this isn't pressure that can be easily sidestepped. Unlike traditional sanctions, which can be worked around via intermediary countries, secondary tariffs create a direct dilemma for all of Russia's trading partners. It's like Trump built a net where every Russian move tightens the noose even more. The strategy is also psychologically smart because it forces Russia to make a decision within a set deadline instead of letting the conflict drag on indefinitely. The European reaction has been notably divided, reflecting the continent's different economic and geopolitical realities. Eastern European countries like Poland and the Baltic states have welcomed Trump's tougher approach, seeing it as a way to finally force a resolution to the conflict. In Western Europe, the picture is very different. Germany and France are deeply worried about the economic fallout from a potential trade breakup with the U.S. European lawmakers have already started talks about creating a stability fund to compensate countries most affected by the American tariffs. The interesting thing is that this European split might actually weaken the bloc's bargaining position. While some countries push for a harder line against Russia, others are more focused on avoiding economic damage. This lack of unity could give Trump more room to maneuver in pushing his strategy. In Asia, regional powers are reacting in quite different ways. China, as mentioned, has taken a cautious stance, avoiding direct confrontation with the U.S. while strengthening ties with alternative energy suppliers. Japan and South Korea, traditional U.S. allies, are in a more comfortable spot. Both countries had already significantly cut back on Russian energy imports, so the new tariffs wouldn't hit them as hard as other Asian countries. India is perhaps the most interesting case. As a democracy maintaining relations with both sides of the conflict, New Delhi is uniquely positioned to potentially mediate talks. In the United States, Trump's strategy emerges in a complex political context. The Democratic Party has questioned whether this approach genuinely aims to resolve the conflict or is primarily a play to gain domestic support. Recent polls show about 55% of Americans back tougher sanctions on Russia, but only 32% believe a 50-day deadline will produce real results. This public opinion split reflects the complexity of the issue and the challenge of balancing geopolitical goals with economic realities. Senior Republican figures have praised what they call Trump's firm hand, seeing the strategy as a way to show American leadership without committing domestic resources. However, even within the Republican Party, there are concerns about the potential economic fallout of a global trade escalation. Looking at possible outcomes, we can identify some main scenarios. The first would be a ceasefire agreement within the set deadline. While ideal, the complexity of the issues involved makes this scenario relatively unlikely without substantial concessions from both sides. The second scenario is the implementation of tariffs after 50 days, leading to significant economic fallout between the U.S. and several countries trading with Russia. This could cause a fundamental reshuffling of global supply chains and international trade patterns. A third possible scenario is an extension of the deadline paired with intensified negotiations. Trump could use the tariff threat as ongoing pressure, tweaking deadlines and conditions as needed to keep diplomatic pressure high. Regardless of the immediate outcome, this strategy represents a fundamental shift in how the U.S. wields its global influence. Using trade tariffs as a diplomatic pressure tool isn't new, but the scale and scope of Trump's proposal are unprecedented. This approach could set a new standard for managing international conflicts in the future. If successful, it might encourage other countries to use similar economic tools to influence geopolitical behavior. On the other hand, if the strategy fails, it could erode trust in the international trade system and potentially speed up the development of alternative economic systems that bypass American dominance. Trump's 50-day ultimatum is more than just a trade threat. It's an ambitious attempt to use American economic power to force a diplomatic resolution to one of the 21st century's most complex conflicts. The coming weeks will be crucial to see if this strategy delivers the results Trump wants or sparks a global trade tension escalation. What's clear is that no matter the outcome, we're witnessing a fundamental reshaping of international relations. For you watching our channel, stay tuned because this situation is evolving fast. If you want to understand how these geopolitical moves might affect everything from gas prices to the cost of imported goods you buy at the supermarket, subscribe, leave a like, and share this video. In the next episodes, we'll keep following the developments and breaking down how it might impact our daily lives.